The manila folder on my desk was plain, unassuming. Just like me, I suppose. Or at least, the me they all expected. I picked it up, the weight of its contents familiar. A small smile, one I hadn't practiced but felt genuine, touched my lips. Tonight, I whispered to the empty room, the expensive silk of my dress rustling. The performance ends. My name is Madeline, and for the last 15 years, I've been the unofficial bank therapist and general dog's body for my family. Tonight was my mother, Lucille's 60th birthday party. A lavish affair at the Orangery, a venue so exclusive you practically needed a royal decree to book it. Guess who was footing the bill? Hint, not Lucille, and certainly not my father, Hugh, or my perpetually finding himself younger brother, Spencer. I adjusted the strap of my dress, a designer number I'd bought on a rare whim, only to have Lucille comment, "Oh, that's bold, dear. Are you sure it's appropriate for your age?" I'm 36. She said this while wearing a new diamond bracelet I'd paid for, a little pre-birthday cheer-up she'd wheedled out of me. The familiar dread churned in my stomach, a sensation as customary as brushing my teeth. But tonight, something else mingled with it, a cold, hard knot of resolve. "Maddie, are you ready? We can't be late for your mother's grand entrance." Hugh's voice boomed from downstairs. His joviality was always loudest when someone else was paying. "Coming, Dad," I called back, my voice betraying none of the turmoil. I remembered Spencer just last year. He was 28 then, on his fourth genius startup. This one involved artisanal, ethically sourced, gluten-free dog biscuits. "Maddie, sis, I just need another 20 grand, he'd said, all earnest charm, leaning against my kitchen counter. The Kickstarter almost hit its goal, but this will push it over the edge. Think of the pups, Maddie." "Spencer," I'd sighed, already reaching for my checkbook because I knew the argument was pointless. "Your last venture was bespoke air for terrariums. It cost me $30,000. He'd waved a dismissive hand. "That was before its time. This dog biscuit thing, it's a gold mine. And besides, you've got loads, right?" "Loads. Yes, I had loads because I worked 60-hour weeks as a senior project manager, sacrificing weekends, holidays, and any semblance of a personal life. Then there was the family holiday to Tuscany 2 years ago. "Madeline, darling," Lucille had cooed over the phone, "your father and I were thinking a lovely villa in the Italian countryside, just for a month. It would do us the world of good. And Spencer, poor boy, he needs a break after that dreadful terrarium business folded. A month, Mom? That's a lot." "Oh, don't be such a stick in the mud, Maddie," Hugh had interjected, grabbing the phone. "It's an investment in family well-being. You can work remotely for a bit, can't you? Besides, you can afford it. It's not like you're spending it on anyone else." The unspoken part hung heavy. No husband, no kids. What else would you do with your money? I'd paid for the villa, the flights, first class for them, naturally, the private chef Lucille insisted they couldn't live without, and Spencer's cultural immersion expenses, which mostly involved expensive nightclubs. I got daily photos of them lounging by the pool while I juggled international conference calls at 3 a.m. Even my own milestones were secondary. When I'd finally bought my own small apartment, a place that was just mine, their reaction was lukewarm. "It's cozy, dear," Lucille had said, wrinkling her nose slightly at the compact kitchen. "Bit small, isn't it?" Hugh had added. "Hardly room to swing a cat. You should have stretched for that place over in Kensington we saw. Now, that had potential for family gatherings. The family gatherings, they meant, were ones where I'd cater to their every whim. The fact that the Kensington place was 3 times the price, and utterly beyond my sensible budget, was irrelevant to them. My needs were always an afterthought, if they were a thought at all. I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back was tired. Yes, but her eyes held a spark I hadn't seen in years. The dread was still there, a faint echo, but the resolve was winning. I tucked the plain manila folder into my oversized designer handbag. Another gift to myself, another item they'd probably critique later. "Showtime," I murmured, and headed downstairs to the architects of my gilded cage. The orangerie was a symphony of clinking glasses, forced laughter, and the subtle scent of too much money. Lucille, resplendent in a sequin gown that cost more than my first car, was holding court, accepting fawning compliments from distant relatives I barely recognized. Hugh was already on his third glass of champagne, his face flushed, regaling a captive audience with a story where he was undoubtedly the hero. Spencer was hovering near the canapé table, stuffing his face and occasionally trying to impress a young woman who looked thoroughly bored. "Madeline, darling!" Aunt Prudence, Lucille's sister, enveloped me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "You look, well, that dress is certainly a statement." Her eyes scanned me, a silent tally of perceived flaws. Uncle Graham, her husband, merely grunted a hello, his gaze already drifting towards the bar. "Thank you, Aunt Prudence," I said, my smile firmly in place. "Mom seems to be enjoying herself." "Oh, of course, dear. Thanks to you naturally," Prudence said, her voice dripping with the false sweetness. "We were just saying Lucille is so lucky to have such a devoted daughter." The unspoken word rich hung in the air. I excused myself, claiming I needed to check on the cake, and found a relatively quiet alcove near a potted palm. The pressure in my chest was immense. Years of this. Years of being the ATM, the problem solver, the silent benefactor whose own life was a footnote in their grand narrative. Later, as dessert plates were being cleared, Hugh tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The chatter gradually died down. "Friends, family," he began, beaming, his voice slightly slurred. "What a wonderful turnout from my beautiful Lucille's big 6-0. She doesn't look a day over 40, does she?" A smattering of polite applause. Lucille preened. "We've built a wonderful life, a wonderful family," Hugh continued, puffing out his chest, "and it wouldn't be possible without everyone playing their part." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing squarely on me. A wide, almost predatory grin spread across his face. "And of course, a special thank you to our little cash cow over here, Madeline." My breath hitched. Cash cow. He actually said it. Out loud. "Good thing she has no life of her own to distract her from supporting us all." A wave of laughter rippled through the room. Not polite titters, but genuine, hearty guffaws. I saw Aunt Prudence smirk. Uncle Graham chuckled into his drink. Spencer, bless his ignorant heart, actually clapped. Lucille just smiled vaguely, as if this was the most normal, affectionate tribute a father could pay his daughter. My face felt hot, but I kept the serene smile plastered on. It was an art I'd perfected. Inside, the cold knot of resolve tightened into a diamond. Under the heavy linen tablecloth hidden from view, my fingers found my phone. I'd already pre-dialed Isaac Pierce, my wealth manager. My thumb hovered over the call button. Hugh, oblivious, was already warming to his next topic. "And speaking of supporting us, we found the most charming little place down in Cornwall. Needs a bit of work, of course, but think of the family holidays. Madeline, darling, we'll need to have a chat about the deposit next week." My thumb pressed down. The call connected. I didn't need to speak. The brief silence on my end was the signal. "Just a small place," Hugh was saying. "Sea views, lovely garden for Lucille." His phone, sitting on the table beside his champagne flute, began to ring. A shrill, insistent tone that cut through his monologue. "Oh, for heaven's sake," he grumbled, annoyed at the interruption. "Who's calling at this hour?" He picked it up, fumbling slightly, and pressed the speaker button without looking at the caller ID. "Yes, what is it?" he barked. A calm, professional voice filled the sudden silence. "Mr. Hugh?" This is Isaac Pierce from Sterling Wealth Management. I'm calling regarding several significant irregularities we've detected on the primary accounts linked to your name, specifically the joint access accounts funded by Miss Madeline. Hugh's jovial expression faltered. Irregularities? What are you talking about? Given the nature and scale of these irregularities, and acting on prior instructions from the primary account holder, we've had to place an immediate precautionary freeze on all withdrawals and transfers from these accounts, pending a full review. The color drained from Hugh's face. He stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. A freeze? What? What prior instructions? Madeline, what is this? The party chatter had completely ceased. Every eye in the room was now fixed on our table, on Hugh's ghostly white face. He looked up, his gaze finding mine. Panic was dawning in his eyes, replacing the arrogant bluster. What? What is the meaning of this? He stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper loud in the sudden oppressive silence. I met his panicked gaze. My smile, serene and unwavering, remained. Happy birthday, Mom, I said softly, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet. The silence in the orangery stretched, taut and suffocating. Hugh's hand, still holding his phone, trembled. Isaac's calm voice on the speakerphone was a stark contrast to the mounting hysteria on my father's face. Mr. Hugh, we will of course provide full documentation. However, the freeze is immediate and currently irreversible from our end without direct authorization from Miss Madeline. Madeline, Lucille hissed, her voice a shocked whisper. Her perfectly applied lipstick seemed to crack with the strain of her sudden frown. What on earth is he talking about? Tell him to fix this right now. Before I could answer, Hugh slammed the phone down, cutting Isaac off mid-sentence. He rounded on me, his face a mottled red and white. What have you done? He seethed, his voice low and dangerous. Spencer, looking utterly bewildered, stared from me to Hugh and back again, a half-eaten profiterole forgotten in his hand. I've simply secured my own finances, Dad, I said, my voice even. The accounts Isaac mentioned are, and always have been, mine. I've decided to manage them differently from now on. Differently? Lucille shrieked, forgetting to keep her voice down. Heads were turning, whispers erupting like wildfire. What do you mean, differently? You can't just cut us off. It's my birthday. This is just a misunderstanding, Hugh blustered, trying to regain control, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. A silly, cruel joke, Madeline. Not funny at all. It's no joke, Dad, I replied, meeting his gaze. The arrangements have changed, permanently. The rest of the party was a blur of strained apologies and hasty departures. Aunt Prudence and Uncle Graham cornered me briefly by the coat check. Madeline, dear, Prudence began, her tone dripping with faux concern. I'm sure this is just a little family tiff. You'll sort it out. Your parents rely on you so. They'll have to learn to rely on themselves, Aunt Prudence, I said, pulling on my coat. The drive home was silent, a stark contrast to the usual post-event critiques of food, guests, and my perceived shortcomings. Back at my apartment, the barrage began. My phone lit up with calls and texts. Hugh, Lucille, Spencer, Hugh again. Call me immediately. This is outrageous. Maddie, Mom is hysterical. What did you do? You ungrateful little... You will reverse this now. I let them all go to voicemail, reading the frantic text previews with a strange sense of detachment. I made myself a cup of tea, the simple ritual calming. The next morning, the real storm hit. Madeline, my card was declined at the deli. Lucille's voice was shrill over the phone. I decided to answer, just to hear it. Declined? For a piece of salmon. The humiliation. That card was linked to an account I've closed, Mom, I said calmly. You'll need to use your own funds. A choked sob. My own funds? Madeline, you know I don't have funds. Then perhaps it's time to acquire some, I suggested, and hung up before the screaming started. Later, it was Spencer. His voice was tight with panic. Maddie, the bank just called. The loan for positive provisions. They're recalling it. They said the guarantee, your guarantee, is no longer valid. What the hell is going on? Positive provisions? I asked, feigning ignorance. Oh, the artisanal dog biscuits. Yes, Spencer. The assets I used to guarantee that loan were never family property. They were mine, and I've just sold them. The recall is irreversible. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I could almost hear the cogs whirring in his usually sluggish brain. Sold them? He finally choked out. But that was my seed money, my business. You can't do this. You'll ruin me. You are ruining me, Spencer, I said, my voice hardening. Consider this your first lesson in fiscal responsibility. Perhaps your next venture could involve actually earning the capital first. I disconnected the call, his sputtering protest cut short. Hugh didn't call. He texted. A long, rambling message filled with threats, accusations of betrayal, and demands that I see sense and rectify this egregious error. He mentioned lawyers. He mentioned disowning me, which I found mildly amusing since I was the one doing the financial disowning. I replied to his lengthy tirade with a single sentence. All financial support from me has ceased. Please manage your affairs accordingly. The nascent sense of freedom was intoxicating, even though a small part of me braced for the inevitable escalation. They wouldn't give up easily. They'd never had to. But this time, the locks had been changed, the accounts were empty, and the cash cow had finally definitively left the pasture. And she'd taken the milk, the cream, and the entire dairy farm with her. The initial shockwave from the party and the immediate financial cutoff soon gave way to a series of increasingly desperate maneuvers from my family. First came Lucille's attempt at emotional blackmail. Madeline, her voice was tear-choked and weak when I finally picked up after her 10th call one afternoon. My blood pressure. The doctor said I need to avoid stress. What you're doing. You're killing me, Madeline. You're destroying this family. I'm sorry to hear you're not well, Mom, I said, my tone carefully neutral. Perhaps cutting back on unnecessary expenses might alleviate some of your stress. Living within one's means can be quite calming. Unnecessary expenses? She wailed. Are you calling your own mother an unnecessary expense? After everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Besides teach me that love is apparently conditional on my bank balance? The question hung in the air, unanswered, before she dissolved into another round of sobs and accusations that I was heartless. I suggested she speak to Hugh about their financial planning and ended the call. Hugh, predictably, tried a different tack. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, banging on the door like a bailiff. I didn't open it. Madeline, I know you're in there. Open this door. We need to talk sense into you. He bellowed through the wood. I picked up my phone and texted him. Dad, you are trespassing. If you do not leave my property, I will call the police. His banging stopped abruptly. I heard him muttering furiously. Then his heavy footsteps retreated. Patriarchal authority, it seemed, wilted in the face of actual consequences. Then it was Aunt Prudence's turn. She called, her voice oozing synthetic sympathy. Madeline, dear, I'm so worried about Lucille and Hugh. They're not coping well. This situation is just dreadful for everyone. It is what it is, Aunt Prudence, I replied. Well, yes, but surely there's a compromise to be found. A small allowance, perhaps, just to tide them over? For Lucille's health, you understand. My parents are adults, Aunt Prudence. They are capable of managing their own affairs, or learning to. But they've always relied on your generosity, dear. It's a bit of a shock to their system. Then consider this a much-needed jolt, I said, my patience wearing thin. I'm not discussing my finances with you or with them any further. I spent the next few days methodically severing the remaining tendrils. I called the utility companies for my parents' oversized, under-occupied house. I'm Madeline. I told the bored-sounding representative from the electric company. I'm calling to remove my name as the responsible party for payments at 12 Willow Creek Drive. As of today, I will no longer be covering those bills. I did the same for the gas, the water, the ridiculously expensive cable and internet package Hugh insisted was essential. Each call was a small act of liberation. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't immediately recognize. Maddie, it's Uriel. Uriel Armstrong, from college. Heard some whispers. Just wanted to see if you're okay. Uriel. We'd been close once, study buddies in economics, sharing dreams of travel and ambitious careers. Then my family's demands had escalated, my free time had vanished, and we drifted apart. He'd gone on to become a successful architect, traveling the world, living the kind of life I'd once envisioned for myself. I hesitated, then typed back. Uriel, wow, blast from the past. I'm navigating some changes. But yes, I'm okay. More than okay, actually. It's good to hear from you. His reply was instant. Glad to hear it. If you ever want to grab coffee and actually tell me about these changes, the offer's there. No pressure. A genuine smile touched my lips. Maybe, just maybe, there was a world beyond my family's suffocating orbit. A week later, a crisp, official-looking envelope arrived. A lawyer's letter. My parents, through Messrs. Grabbit, Run and Hide, I kid you not, that was the firm's name on the letterhead, were formally asserting that I had a moral and familial obligation to continue supporting them. They were threatening legal action to access what they termed her significant contributions to the family estate over many years. I read it, then actually laughed out loud, a real, unrestrained laugh. Family estate? I said to my empty apartment. The only estate they have a claim to is the one of delusion. There was no jointly owned property, no formal agreements, just years of my money flowing into their pockets. Their legal standing was non-existent, and they were about to find that out the hard way. This wasn't just about stopping the flow of money anymore. It was about dismantling the entire rotten structure they'd built on my back. The lawyer's letter was just the opening salvo in their increasingly frantic attempts to claw back their comfortable lifestyle. But the ground was shifting beneath their feet, faster than they could scramble. Spencer called again, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Maddie, Positive Provisions is done. Officially. The bank. They took everything, the artisanal mixers, the organic spelt flour, even the custom-printed biodegradable poop bags with the paw print logo. I'm sorry to hear that, Spencer, I said, and I almost meant it. Almost. There was a tiny, vindictive part of me that pictured him trying to explain gluten-free dog biscuits to a bewildered repossession agent. What am I supposed to do now? He asked, a pathetic whine creeping into his tone. You could try getting a job, Spencer, I suggested. One that pays you, instead of one you expect me to pay for. He hung up on me. Some things, it seemed, never changed. News of the declined credit cards and bounced payments for their country club membership had, predictably, started to circulate. Lucille, I heard through the grapevine, a surprisingly efficient network of my mother's former bridge partners, had been utterly mortified when her usual table at the Fig and Thistle was politely given to someone else due to unresolved billing issues. Hugh, apparently, had made a scene at the golf club when his access fob no longer worked. The humiliation was a tangible consequence, one they couldn't ignore or bully their way out of. The threat of losing their house, the sprawling 5-bedroom monument to their unearned status, became very real. The first disconnection notices for the utilities arrived. Lucille called me, hysterical. Madeline, they're going to cut off the electricity. The electricity. How can you let this happen? I'm not letting it happen, Mom. You and Dad are, by not paying your bills. But we don't have the money. You know that. Then you'll need to find it. Or perhaps consider a smaller, more manageable property. The shriek that followed nearly deafened me. To preempt any ludicrous legal claims about contributions to the family estate, as their grasping lawyer had put it, I decided to meticulously review all my old financial documents. I wanted every I dotted, every T crossed. Isaac had advised it just to be thorough. "Leave no stone unturned, Madeline," he'd said. "People get desperate." It was late one evening, surrounded by stacks of bank statements and investment portfolios going back 15 years, that I found it. Tucked away in a box labeled Old University Papers, Keep, was a thinner, older-looking file. Inside, a faded passbook for a trust account I'd almost forgotten existed. It had been set up by my maternal grandparents, a modest but significant sum intended for my postgraduate education or as a down payment on a first home. I remembered them telling me about it when I was a teenager, a secret little nest egg for my future. My heart began to pound as I flipped through the brittle pages. Regular deposits from my grandparents. Then, a few years later, just before I graduated college and landed my first well-paying job, the job that had inadvertently marked me as the future family ATM, there was a single massive withdrawal. The entire balance, cleared out. Beneath it, a folded letter. My grandmother's familiar spidery handwriting. It was dated shortly after the withdrawal. "Dearest Madeline," it began. "Your grandfather and I were so disappointed to hear from Lucille and Hugh that you needed to access your education fund early. Hugh explained his new business venture was such a sure thing, and that this would be a temporary loan, repaid with interest, to help the family get ahead before you even started earning. We trust their judgment, of course, but we did want you to know the fund is now depleted. We hope this venture brings them the success they envision, and that you understand." A cold fury so intense it made me shiver washed over me. A temporary loan? Repaid with interest? I'd never seen a penny of it. They hadn't just taken from my present, from the earnings of my hard work. They had stolen from my past, from the love and foresight of my grandparents. They'd plundered my safety net before I even knew I needed one, all to fund one of Hugh's inevitably doomed get-rich-quick schemes. Any lingering speck of guilt, any residual familial obligation I might have subconsciously harbored, evaporated in that instant. "So," I murmured, tracing the withdrawal slip with a shaking finger, the faded ink a testament to their long-ago betrayal. They weren't just taking from my present, they stole from my past, too. This wasn't just about financial independence anymore. This was about justice. The discovery of the stolen trust fund lit a fire under me. Any flickering embers of doubt were extinguished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. They hadn't just been entitled and exploitative, they'd been thieves, cloaking their greed in the guise of family need. The whispers about the Swansons' sudden financial freefall had now become open gossip in their social circles. Lucille, I heard, had tearfully confessed to her hairdresser, who promptly told 3 clients, one of whom was a friend of mine, that they might have to drastically downsize. Hugh had apparently been seen arguing with the manager of the high-end supermarket over the price of imported cheese, a far cry from his usual imperious pronouncements. Spencer, according to a particularly gleeful acquaintance, had been spotted handing out flyers for a car wash, looking thoroughly miserable. Rock bottom was approaching fast, and they were flailing. It was Isaac who called me a few days later, his voice calm but with an underlying edge. "Madeline, we had an attempted unauthorized access on one of your older dormant investment accounts this morning. The Morgan Stanley one you haven't touched in years." My blood ran cold. "What happened?" "2 individuals, a man matching your father's description and a younger man, presumably your brother, tried to liquidate the holdings. They had some old paperwork, claimed you'd given them verbal authorization. When that didn't fly, they tried to pressure a junior associate, someone who apparently used to work at their local bank branch years ago and remembered them. He was clearly uncomfortable and flustered. Did they get anything? I asked, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. No, of course not, Isaac said reassuringly. Our protocols are tight. The junior associate, to his credit, escalated immediately when they started getting aggressive and mentioned forging your signature as a last resort. We have security footage of the entire interaction. They're getting sloppy, Madeline, and very, very desperate. I let out a slow breath. Forgery. They were actually contemplating forgery. The sheer audacity, the utter lack of self-awareness was breathtaking. Thank you, Isaac, for everything. It's my job to protect your assets, Madeline, from anyone. Good, I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. The knowledge of the stolen trust fund, combined with this latest pathetic attempt at theft, was the final straw. Let them. It's time I showed them just how much I know, and just how little they're going to get. I spent the rest of the day on the phone with my own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, who had been quietly advising me for weeks. I laid out everything: the years of financial drain, the cash cow comment, the emotional blackmail, the declined credit cards, the utility cutoffs, the lawyer's letter from Grab It, Run and Hide, and now the attempted fraudulent access and the damning evidence of the pilfered trust fund. They're cornered animals, Madeline, Miss Albright said, her voice crisp, and cornered animals can be dangerous or just incredibly stupid. This attempted fraud is a gift, frankly. It shifts the dynamic considerably. I want to arrange a meeting, I said, with Hugh, Lucille, and Spencer at your office on my terms. Are you sure you're ready for that? She asked. More than ready, I replied. The weariness was still there, a deep ache in my bones, but it was now overlaid with a steely determination. They thought they could intimidate me, wear me down, appeal to a sense of familial guilt that they themselves had systematically eroded over decades. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Ms. Albright drafted a formal letter, not to their lawyers, but directly to Hugh, Lucille, and Spencer. It was an invitation to a meeting to discuss urgent financial matters and outstanding legal concerns. No mention of reconciliation, no hint of compromise, just a time, a date, and the address of her very imposing, very expensive law firm. The ball was in their court, but the game was already over. They just didn't know it yet. I pictured them receiving the letter, a flicker of hope perhaps igniting in their desperate minds. Hope that I was finally cracking, that their little cash cow was ready to be led back to the milking shed. They had no idea they were walking into an abattoir. Metaphorically speaking, of course, mostly. They arrived at Ms. Albright's office looking like drowned rat-ants who'd been dressed by a committee of their enemies. Hugh's suit was rumpled, his usual arrogant swagger replaced by a nervous energy. Lucille clutched a worn handbag, her eyes darting around the opulent reception area, a stark contrast to her usual imperious gaze. Spencer trailed behind them, shoulders slumped, looking like a sulky teenager dragged to a dentist appointment. They probably expected a lecture, maybe some tough negotiation, followed by a grudging reinstatement of their allowance. Ms. Albright led us into a large conference room. I sat on one side of the polished mahogany table, Ms. Albright beside me. A large screen on the wall was set up for a video call, Isaac's face appearing moments later, calm and professional. Hugh, Lucille, and Spencer sat opposite, looking small and out of place. Thank you for coming, Ms. Albright began, her voice devoid of warmth. Madeline has asked for this meeting to address several serious matters. Hugh cleared his throat. Yes, well, it's about time. This whole situation has been a complete farce, Madeline, a childish tantrum. I ignored him, looking directly at Ms. Albright, who nodded. Firstly, Ms. Albright said, sliding a neatly bound document across the table towards them, this is a summary of the financial support Madeline has provided over the last 15 years. It details mortgages paid, loans covered, credit card bills settled, holidays funded, and direct cash transfers. The total, as you can see, is substantial. Hugh scoffed, but didn't pick up the document. Lucille's eyes widened slightly. Spencer just stared at the table. Secondly, Ms. Albright continued, her voice like ice, we have a recording from Mrs. Swanson's 60th birthday party. She gestured to me. I leaned forward. Dad, you might recall your toast, specifically the part where you referred to me as your little cash cow and joked about me having no life of her own to distract her from supporting us all. The laughter from the guests was quite something. We have it all on tape, should your memory be hazy. Hugh's face flushed a dark red. Lucille looked down at her hands. Thirdly, Ms. Albright pressed on, there's the matter of the recent attempt to fraudulently access one of Madeline's investment accounts at Morgan Stanley. Mr. Pierce? She nodded to the screen. Can you confirm the details? Isaac's voice filled the room. Certainly. On Tuesday at 10:32 a.m., two individuals, identified by security footage as Mr. Hugh and Mr. Spencer, attempted to liquidate assets using falsified authorization. When challenged, they became aggressive and suggested forging Miss Madeline's signature. Spencer visibly flinched. Hugh opened his mouth, then closed it again, a muscle twitching in his jaw. And finally, I said, my voice low and steady, my gaze fixed on my parents, there's the matter of my grandparents' trust fund. I pushed a second, thinner file across the table. The one you emptied, Dad, just before I started working. The one you told Grandma and Grandpa was a temporary loan for one of your business schemes to be repaid with interest. I never saw a penny of it. You stole my inheritance before I even had a chance to inherit it. Lucille gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Madeline, that's not true. Hugh, tell her. Hugh stared at the file, his face ashen. He looked utterly defeated. It is true, Mom, I said. I have Grandma's letter. I have the bank statements. I stood up. For 15 years, I have put your needs, your wants, your extravagances before my own. I sacrificed my youth, my ambitions, my personal life to keep you all afloat. And in return, I was ridiculed, taken for granted, and ultimately robbed. Not just of my money, but of my trust and my past. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of every silent resentment, every swallowed insult. There will be no reconciliation. There will be no further financial support. There will be no negotiation. This isn't a discussion. This is a statement of fact. You are on your own. Lucille started to sob, fat tears rolling down her cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. But we're your family, she choked out. Spencer just sat there, pale and silent, the fight completely gone from him. Hugh finally looked up, his eyes filled with a dawning, horrified understanding of their complete and irreversible ruin. He looked old, suddenly, broken. But we're your family, he whispered, echoing Lucille, his voice raspy. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice devoid of warmth, devoid of pity. A family doesn't bleed one of its own dry and then laugh about it. You taught me the value of money, Father. You just never expected me to apply the lesson to you. I turned to Ms. Albright. I believe we're done here. Ms. Albright nodded. This meeting is over. My office will handle any further communication, should there be any, which I strongly advise against, given the potential legal ramifications of the attempted fraud and the misappropriation of trust funds. I walked toward the door, not looking back. The sound of Lucille's weeping was the only sound in the room. As I reached the doorway, I paused just for a second. A grim satisfaction settled in my chest, quickly followed by the first true tentative stirrings of peace. The performance was well and truly over. The heavy oak door of Ms. Albright's conference room clicked shut behind me, the sound definitive, like a period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, blinking a little. The air felt different, lighter. Or maybe it was me. The fallout, when it came, was less of an explosion and more of a slow, inevitable crumbling. There were no more angry calls, no desperate texts, just a vast, echoing silence from their corner of the world. Ms. Albright handled a few pathetic, blustering inquiries from their cut-rate lawyer, which she dismissed with practiced ease. The threats of legal action over my familial obligation evaporated when confronted with the evidence of the stolen trust fund and the attempted fraud. They had no leg to stand on, and they knew it. News trickled back to me, as it always does in small, interconnected worlds. The sprawling house on Willow Creek Drive went on the market, its price dropping steadily as the unpaid bills mounted and the garden grew wild. Eventually, it sold for far less than they'd hoped, most of the proceeds swallowed by outstanding debts Hugh had accrued over years of mismanagement, debts I was no longer there to magically erase. I heard Hugh found a job, something in retail, a sales assistant in a department store he once would have considered beneath him to even shop in. Lucille apparently started working part-time as a receptionist at a dental clinic. The indignity for her must have been monumental. Spencer, after a string of failed attempts to launch yet another genius idea, this time involving personalized pet horoscopes, funded by who knows what dwindling resource, was reportedly working shifts at a local coffee shop, the irony not lost on me. Their social standing, built on a foundation of my money, had disintegrated. They were just ordinary people, struggling like anyone else, perhaps more so, given their lifelong aversion to actual effort. I didn't seek out this information, but it found me anyway. Aunt Prudence tried to call once, her tone now wheedling and desperate, full of talk about forgiveness and family being family. "Prudence," I'd said, cutting her off gently but firmly. My family showed me exactly what they thought of me for 36 years. I'm just returning the sentiment. Please don't call again about this. She hadn't. My own life began to blossom in the space they had vacated. I took that coffee with Uriel, then another. He didn't ask about the whispers he'd heard, not until I was ready to talk. And when I did, haltingly at first, then with a growing sense of catharsis, he just listened. He didn't judge. He didn't offer platitudes. He just understood. "You know," he said one evening as we walked by the river, the city lights twinkling on the water, "I always wondered what happened to that fiery girl from Econ 101 who was going to change the world." I smiled, a real, easy smile. "She got a little sidetracked, but I think she's finding her way back." I started a small consultancy, leveraging my project management skills, but on my own terms, for projects I actually believed in. I even enrolled in a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do, my hands finally creating something for myself instead of just signing checks for others. The feel of the clay, cool and malleable, was grounding. There was a cost, of course. There's always a cost. The final severing of family ties, even ties as toxic and damaging as mine had been, leaves a scar. There were moments, late at night, when a pang of something akin to sadness would surface, not for them, not for what they'd become, but for the family I wished I'd had, the one that existed only in greeting card platitudes. But those moments became fewer, fainter. The overwhelming feeling, the one that settled deep in my bones, was peace. A profound, hard-won peace. I had my apartment, my work, my budding relationship with Uriel, my lopsided pottery creations. My life was smaller, in some ways, than the grand charade I'd been funding, but it was mine. Every single, solitary, gloriously independent piece of it. They called me their cash cow. I remember Hugh's booming voice, the laughter. It used to make my stomach clench. Now, I just shake my head. Turns out, I was the one holding the deed to the farm all along. And now, I'm finally tending my own garden. It's amazing what can grow when you remove the weeds. The air is cleaner here. I can breathe.